What's going on, guys? This video is going to be about the Sony X3000. It's the 4K camera from Sony. Competes with the GoPro Hero 5. So I'll start off after this section. I'll show you how it's set up on the helmet, what microphone I'm using, and some modifications that I made to the case. And then it'll go back to more sample footage just so you can see how everything looks. All right, enjoy. Okay, so before we actually take a look to see how the camera is configured on the helmet, I just want to give kind of a brief overview about the camera, talk about some of the features and pros and cons that I like about it. So this is the Sony X3000R. As of right now, this is the latest flagship action cam from Sony. It competes with the GoPro Hero 5. The R in the name just means that it comes with this live view remote, which we'll talk about in a minute. So as you can see, form factor of the camera, it is narrow in the front versus a GoPro, which is wide. So it works best, I think, in a side mount setup rather than a chin mount setup. You could also put it on top of the helmet if you wanted to do something like that. In terms of video quality, there are great reviews that get really into the nitty-gritty about the video quality, but this is excellent. It's a 4K camera. I typically shoot in 1080, and then it has a whole host of resolution options, I think up to 120 or 240 frames a second, and then also various bitrate options for really good color quality. I like that this camera is water resistant without the housing, meaning that you can use it even on the motorcycle when it's raining on the highway, and you don't need to have it in this housing, and it'll still be safe. I still do use the housing because it just gives extra protection from rocks and debris and bugs, things like that. Another advantage of this camera is that it has a standard microphone port on the back. So rather than having to use special adapters to hook up a microphone, you can just plug your microphone directly into this. And then I'd say the big feature about this camera is the image stabilization. So where a GoPro has digital image stabilization, what that does is it's digitally cropping the image. And so what you're getting is actually a smaller image than the camera's capturing, and then the camera kind of adjusts where that is to try to compensate for movement. This camera has optical image stabilization, which means that the lens elements and the sensor are actually floating, and so they move to provide the optically stabilized image. And so it's much more effective than digital stabilization, and it provides just a much more natural look. The other feature is this remote. This remote is also waterproof. It doesn't need any special housing. And what's nice about this is it connects to the camera over low energy Bluetooth. So even though everything is off right now, if you turn the remote on, you hear the camera turn on, and then it does take a while for it to actually connect. I'd say that's one of the cons of this. It probably takes anywhere between 10 and 20 seconds for this to actually make a Wi-Fi connection to connect to the camera. Okay, now it's connected, so we're getting a live view. It has all of the status icons that are shown on the camera screen, so I can see that I can see the battery level, that it's in 30 frames a second, MP4, what the angle of view is. All of that stuff is shown on here. And this also has all of the buttons that are on the camera so that you can adjust all of the settings right from this. You don't actually need to touch the camera. One other feature I forgot to mention is that this camera has GPS built in. So if you use the Sony software when you're pulling the video off the SD card, you can actually overlay, there's different options, but it can draw maps of where you've been. It'll show your speed and just some really cool stuff that it can do with the GPS. So that's kind of a nice thing. And then also I found if you're reviewing footage and you're looking for cool parts that you've recorded, when you're looking at the map, you can actually see, here's a really twisty section, so you can pan to that and pull out that footage. All right, so back to the remote. The remote doesn't have a replaceable battery. I'm going to turn the camera off. But it charges through these contacts here, so they give you this charging cradle. So when you want to charge it, you have to plug it into this, and then there's a micro USB port to charge the remote. They also give you another thing that's similar to this that locks the remote in, that has a tripod mount on the back. It's not used for charging, it's just used for mounting the remote. So what I've done is, and I'll show a picture of this, I used a handlebar to tripod adapter, mounted that on the handlebar of the motorcycle, so I have a spot where I can just clip this in, and then I have a, the remote is just right at my fingertips, so I can turn the camera on and off, and I can stop and start the recording. When the camera's on and it's connected to the remote, like I said, there's a bit of a delay for it to connect the first time, but once it's actually on and you're getting the live view, then when you hit the record button, it's instantaneous. So it'll start recording automatically. Hit it again, it'll stop recording. And then having the live view on the remote is really handy for getting your camera angle set up. So when you get the camera on the helmet for the first time, you're trying to adjust your angles and make sure everything looks right. It's much easier to have this because you can just hold this in front of you, sit on the bike, and then make all your adjustments, and you'll see how everything looks right on this, and you get it dialed in and then lock it down. So I mentioned that the remote doesn't have a replaceable battery, but the camera does have replaceable batteries. It's a standard Sony battery. This is the BX1. I bought an extra, and then I also bought this Sony travel charger, which is just slightly larger than the battery, and then all of the charging electronics are built in. So you just pop the battery in, and then it has a micro USB port to charge it. What's nice about this is you can just connect it to a USB battery pack to charge this battery, or if you've got a USB port on the motorcycle, you can use this to always have a second battery ready to go. Alright, so now we'll take a look at see how this thing's actually set up on the camera, or on the helmet.
Okay, so we're going to take a look at the components that actually make up this setup. The first thing that I started with is the underwater housing that just comes with the camera. You can see it's just a clear plastic housing. It's got buttons that pass through, and then the way it opens is there's a little latch down here, and then the front comes off. The way I modified it is use the Dremel tool to open up this back port so that it aligns with the access panel on the back of the camera. When you open this, you have access to the USB and microphone inputs. That way, when it's on the camera, you can have a microphone hooked up. You could also have a USB battery powering this if you're going to use this for an extended amount of time while you're on the bike. The waterproof housing then is just mounted on the Sony side helmet mount, which basically just has this buckle that clips into the mount right here. So when you're setting this up, you just open the back panel on the camera, slide it in, close it, and then now you have access to the back port on the camera. Another option that you could do is run it without this waterproof housing. This just uses a tripod mount, so this can actually connect directly to the camera without using the housing. The reason I like the housing is that it provides better water protection even though the camera is already water resistant by itself. So you could run it in the rain without any problems. But also it'll protect the lens and protect the buttons in the front of the camera, the microphone holes, from rocks, bugs, all that nasty stuff that gets on your helmet. Sony also makes a screen protector that you could put on that just covers the front, but I still have the same concern that the microphone holes and that the screen and the other buttons would just be vulnerable to getting hit with rocks and bugs. So this makes it a lot cleaner. I should say though that even though the camera is water resistant without this case, that assumes that all of the panels are closed. So I normally have the microphone set up if I'm recording, but if I am in the rain, I do disconnect the microphone cable and shut this, but it's not a problem that this is open. However, you wouldn't be able to use this housing if you were actually diving with this camera, which is why I bought a second one so that I can use it underwater with the normal intact housing. Nice thing about this setup too is Once you get this configured, you get your angles set up, you can adjust how everything looks. Then you don't have to adjust anything to take the camera out. So if you want to use the camera either at a different spot on the bike or just use it for some other activity, you just take the camera out of the case, but all of your adjustments are fixed. So you don't have to keep readjusting and checking the angle of the camera. So as I mentioned, this is the adhesive mount. This is just the Sony adhesive mount. I used a little bit of extra 3M tape. It's the same, I forget the type of tape it is, but it's the really strong double-sided tape, just to adjust for the curvature of my helmet. And you'll see this tether strap. This is something that comes with the mount, and they give you a little sticky tab that you can put on, and you attach the tether to that, so that if the adhesive were to fail, you have a second point that could potentially save it. All I did is I ran the tether up inside the helmet and tied it off to one of the chin straps. So there's no way that this tether is ever going to come off. I don't imagine this thing's ever going to come off, but if this were ever to come off, then this tether would save the camera from actually falling and hitting the road. And then what I do with the microphone cable is I just tuck it into the back of the neck roll when I'm not using it, which keeps it out of the way, keeps it from flapping around. But then whenever you need it, it's right there. You just pull it out and plug it into the back of the camera. And this might be hard to see, but there's the actual microphone. This is the Sony, I'll have to double check the model. I believe it's the ECM3, CS3, something like that. But I just have the wire run behind the cheek pad, and then I put a little strip of Velcro. Actually, I have to pull this out. So this is what the microphone looks like. It doesn't come with the windscreens. I bought those separately on Amazon. I'll have a link down in the bottom that shows you which ones to get. I think it came in a pack of 5, and I just stuck those on there just to provide a little extra wind protection. And this is actually a lapel mic, so there is a clip that's mounted right here. If you bend the clip out of the way, there's a little screw. You take the screw off and then the clip comes off, which gets it out of the way. And then I just put a little piece of Velcro and a little strip of Velcro down in the face of the helmet. And so that stays right there. It's a really nice clean setup. Gets good stereo audio. Alright guys, so here's some sample footage with the Sony X3000. This audio is being recorded on the microphone that's in the helmet. And hopefully you can get a sense of how smooth the image looks with the optical image stabilization. And you might even be able to notice the helmet kind of appears to move in and out of the frame, and that's a result, as I mentioned before, of that image stabilization. So it does a really good job of kind of isolating the small movements from like wind buffeting and things like that. But then as you turn your head, the camera does follow in the direction that you're looking.
Feels nice. Looks nice.